Welcome to UPThinking Finance, a podcast that offers a unique and discerning view of economics and financial planning. Here is your host, Emerson Fersch.
Welcome to another episode of UPThinking Finance. Donald Trump once said, "Sometimes by losing a battle, you find a new way to win the war." So I don't think there's a better way to start off the year than having a conversation with my friend John Waters, who's over in Dublin. He's an Irish thinker, talker, and writer. John, welcome back to UPThinking Finance.
Thank you very much, Emerson. Great to be with you again.
Yeah, no, it's great to see you. And I'll tell you what, just before I don't want to forget, John Waters posts on Substack at johnwaters.substack.com. Excellent content weekly, just great insights, and really puts words to, I think, how a lot of us are feeling. I got to start off with this, though, for the conversation. Let me share my screen here. This was on a blog of yours a couple of weeks ago. And I tell you what, I couldn't stop laughing. So this is a picture John posted. For those of you who are listening, it's a picture of a sofa that's basically engulfed in flames, labeled Ireland. And then there's a picture of a person sitting at the other end of the sofa where the flames haven't quite arrived yet, labeled Irish people, who's asleep. And
I randomly came across that on something on Telegram or something like that. And I said, that's it. That's absolutely it, you know.
So, well, then my thought came to my mind is, okay, if we label this sofa America, all we got to do is stick a cell phone in somebody's hand and an empty bucket or bag of fast food at their feet, and the picture's complete. But I guess let's just start with that. I mean, you wrote in this last blog of, I think, your diary of that was just this last week, and I love all your stuff, but you mentioned this comment, kind of just talking about being glad to be back in Dublin. Rather, it's easier to be angry than it is to be sad, and kind of, how to talk to people who just don't seem to know what's happened to them over the last few years. And but then you also mentioned this idea of a resistance. So I'm throwing out a bunch of stuff, but I'm kind of wondering how the resistance reconciles with the sofa, or if that is the problem.
Well, it's a good question. I would have said a year ago, it's no way the problem. No, it's not an issue. But I've had a year of kind of opportunity to really see it up close, and I think it might actually be the problem to some extent now. That the resistance has fallen into a way of being as a resistance that is kind of almost like hermetically sealed from the problem, or hermetically sealed from the constituency that it should be addressing. It's almost got adopted this kind of, inward looking, we know everything. We're doing this. We're, we're above sticking our heads above the parapets, and, that's enough. And there isn't really, it seems to me, any attempt to evangelize, any attempt to put it very bluntly, to be attractive to the people who aren't, aware, for all the kind of reasons that I write about every week, Emerson, that I've been trying to drill into, so that people will kind of, I'm not saying I'm the only one who can do it or the only one who does it, but I think it just definitely needs to be done, because we are in such unprecedented circumstances. The conditions we deal with have never occurred before, as far as I know, in the human spectrum, and it seems to me that in a certain sense, the resistance is behaving as if that were not the case, that we were fighting this war in the way that you might have fought a previous attempt to overturn a tyranny. And I'm kind of familiar with some of those. In particular, I'm familiar with one that I studied very closely, was the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia of 1989, before and after. And when you look at the patterns of resistance that developed there, they're quite different to what you're seeing now. I mean, much of what's happening now is online. It's kind of what we're doing here, and that's valid up to a point, but it can't be the whole thing. That when you look back and you saw the kind of character and nature of the people involved in the resistance then, in Czechoslovakia, for example, and that's just one country, but it's similar. Eastern European revolutions were similar in the sense that they attracted the same kind of people in the first instance. They were mainly artists, writers, poets, philosophers, those kind of guys. And you don't need to be that, but those guys, the presence of those guys represents some kind of signal to the rest of society that there's something here you might need to pay attention to. I mean, that was very much the case in Ireland in our great revolution of 1916. It was precisely that kind of revolution. It was a revolution of poets. And that's missing now for all the reasons that we know and which we need to keep reminding ourselves of, which is that there is what I keep calling a pseudo-reality which is being constructed almost every day, almost in the middle of the night, as if, a bunch of stagehands go out with tins of paint and, fake trees and stuff and puts up this new construct again, or this slightly amended construct, so that when people get up in the morning and walk around it, they will think this is reality. And, so many people are caught up in that, including the aforementioned philosophers, poets, writers, painters, etc. And they're not coming in. But the problem here then, Emerson, is that the other problem is I do not believe that the movements that we've created are sufficiently attractive to such people, that even if they were disposed to come in, they probably wouldn't want to at the moment. And that's a problem which I think needs addressing really seriously. But the problem is the other problem is within the movement, when you try to talk at this level about anything, I know in Ireland anyway, you get a very, very bad reaction from within the movement. They start to kind of ambush you and disparage you, and there's all this backbiting and backstabbing, and I found that very much. I ran for election just as a kind of experiment in May. I think we may have mentioned it before. June, the election was in June. It's the European elections. It was kind of a tryout for the national elections, which were due and in fact have happened since in November. I didn't run in those precisely because of the experience I had in that first one, where basically I spent more time fighting off my own side than I did resisting the enemy, and it's because, and I mean, I would be ambushed on, this is what I do. I talk as you do, and this is a huge part of it, talking, trying to kind of explain as you see the complexities and intricacies of where we are. But I would find myself ambushed on a Twitter space. I didn't even know what that was, but there was on one, and being ambushed by somebody like saying, you can't mention Solzhenitsyn because that's over people's heads. Did you ever hear such nonsense? And what are we supposed to talk about then? It's just absurd. And this is running right through the whole thing. I don't like the term intellectual, by the way. I don't like the term intellectualism, and that's not what I am. I come from a pretty ordinary background. I didn't go to college. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just read a few books, which I thought everybody else had done as well, And there's nothing kind of, over anybody's head about talking about one of the great heroes of the modern world, So cop on is my answer to that, and that's kind of, I suppose, a sketch of some of the issues that I see arising in this, movement, which is really not a movement. It seems to me to be a battle all of its own for some kind of supremacy or notice or attention or something. It's kind of like a competition as opposed to being a combination of energies.
You already said it, but it bears repeating. The artists, the poets, that whole group, is in a category that nobody trusts. That's your leftist extremists. I mean, that's where it's gone, right? The educated ones. I mean, at least here they're all, it's a group. It's not anybody you can trust anymore. Everybody's got an agenda. And what you said about your own experience is right. I was thinking about, and we've talked about this before, but I don't know that I brought, this particular point up. I'm one of these guys who woke up, right after the COVID. And, there was this, so we started following people online, right? And it was all these people with the inside knowledge. All of a sudden you think, okay, this whole system's corrupt. So now you're drawn to these truthers that, right? So you got all these people online, that are with these, with anonymous names, like, Santa surfing and, free, ranger, whatever, and everybody's got these labels. And of course, ultimately, well, I'll get to that. But the point is you start following these people, and then you realize as time goes on, it's divisions within the same side, because everybody's, like you said, whether it's monetary, and that's the thing. Russell Napier over there in Edinburgh, he always talks about, you want to get to the bottom line of things, look at incentives. And incentives are, well, ultimately you start looking at what these people are selling, and they've all got a product, right? And that's when I realized, okay, well, that's where you cut, that's where you get away from that, because, they're selling health this or, gold or, showing something, right? And but it's all, and I think that speaks to Trump's first presidency is that there were all these people pulling, and then it just kind of went into the whole his second term election that got stolen. But it's right. There's this self-interest, and it's like, I don't know. Charles Hugh Smith. He's over in Hawaii. He's like, in fact, I got to get him on with you one time. That'd be a great conversation. But he talks about how people, even the ones that are in the bottom, you have the top 1% and then everybody else, right? Well, then you got the real low bottom people, and he talks about how even they'll hang on to this system because they're still getting something out of it, if it's welfare, whatever it might be, because afraid of the unknown. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so this fear of change, you have everybody hanging on to this system. And you reminded me of one other thing. I know, I'm hoping this makes sense, but it's this reluctance for people to admit what you just said. There's like the four most dangerous words in my business are, this time it's different, because the narrative is how everybody's getting paid, right? When you start rattling that cage in any which way, all of a sudden, the whole system that everybody's clinging to starts to fall apart. And I don't know, I think that fits into all this. Does that make sense?
That's a part of it for certain, Emerson. I think that's really is a part of it. I mean, you see, the issue, going back very briefly to the artist thing, definitely, I see there's been a huge problem with artists in the last couple of decades, where they're converging for various reasons around what is called leftism, and as by extension around wokeism. And that's kind of something that is a huge problem. And of course, they're buying into pseudo reality, which is that, the far right are out there in the undergrowth, and they're going to come in and take away your democracy. Your democracy is in danger. Those guys in the long grass, it's not in danger from us at all. They're the danger to the democracy, but they want to pretend that there's a whole group of, guys out there with funny mustaches in the grass who are coming in to take it away. Now, I find, I know a lot of people in that area of artists and writers and so on, just because of my work over the years, and, in theatre and so on. And I still talk to some of them, and there's a wariness about them, because I'm not so sure. We don't even discuss about how much they know about what I say or what I know about stuff. We talk around subjects when we talk. And a lot of these guys are smart guys. A lot of these guys are very, likable people. It's just they're blindsided on all this stuff, and they're scared of, because a lot of the way the whole thing is structured now in the artistic world, it's all set up to be administered by certain people who are really gatekeepers on finance and on opportunity. If you're an artist, if you want to get a book published, you better make sure that these guys don't get to dislike you. If you want to get an exhibition in a gallery, if you want to get your movie made, and so on and so on. Now, but it seems to me the thing, I would really like to appeal to these guys, and I think it's possible. But you need to be a bit smarter than the resistance is being to do that. And you need to actually, be a little bit humble in talking to them and understand their point of view to whatever extent that is necessary. Now, you see, I think the other thing then I think about the movement is that the negativity is becoming more and more intense as we go on. I've said this before, but I mean, when Donald Trump became president in 2016, like, everybody was like cock a hoop, right? I was, you were, everybody felt that, right? Okay, then in 2020, the same thing. And then when he lost, or seemed to lose, or whatever it was that went down there, and we could talk about that for the rest of time, there was a huge disappointment. Okay, so that's like just 4 years ago.
Right.
What's happened in 4 years now? Huge chunks of the same people have decided that Trump is one of them, that he's been bought off. Now, I don't see any changed evidence. I don't see any new evidence of anything in relation to Donald Trump, other than what was available to us in 2020 and 2016. I see the same guy. I see him, hear him say the same things. Now, it's because then we get into the people that he selected. Well, there are question marks that people say about Elon Musk. Maybe I've certainly I've articulated them myself. I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
There are question marks, but there are other people besides him. There's RFK Jr. There's Jay Bhattacharya, brilliant guy. There's Tulsi Gabbard. Now, no matter what you say to people about this, oh, he's a Zionist, she's a shill, she's a blah blah. I'm tired of this stuff, Emerson. I want to just get on with life using the apparatus that I was born with and which I've used all my life to try to understand the world. I don't want to be living my life according to some prophecies that Nostradamus made, centuries ago, or whoever. You know what I mean? I don't want to. I want to use my eyes, my ears, my heart to look at people and understand what I can understand about them. And then place whatever level of trust and hope I wish to in them without being constantly barracked and name called and have these people repeating to me the same mantras over and over again as if I haven't heard them, as if I haven't said them at some point myself. Can we not have a moment where we say, okay, this is what we wanted back then. This is what we hoped for. This is what we went to bed praying for. Can we not now say, okay, let it unfold, let us watch, let us observe, and then let us make judgment?
It feels like it's just a constant battle. You're right. And, you wrote something, I always do this, but I thought this was, you talked about this sense of suspended animation, like we're waiting for the jury to come back with a verdict.
Yeah.
And I was, and 5 years, right? But then you talked a lot about, would you say, can we dare to hope or do you just surrender? And I was thinking, because we've talked about this, I think our second time we had a conversation about how we both have, the sobriety experience in our lives, and that kind of perspective is unique because, you get that, and you know what I'm talking about, where you get that personal whole, going from the pits of despair. I mean, in AA and alcoholism, there's really only a couple outcomes. Either you die or you live and grow and move on. And when you have that, you've seen a miracle. What is it with God? Nothing shall be impossible.
You're exactly right, Emerson. You've actually touched on something that, in a certain sense, I'd forgotten. I haven't forgotten it in other contexts, but in this context, I haven't necessarily applied that, because what you're talking about is that faith and redemption are tightly linked. The faith in the possibility is what enables the redemption to take hold. And it seems to me, that the weird thing about it is there's an awful lot of people that I'm talking about here would lay claim to being Christians and having a very strong religious belief. But it seems to me that what they cling to in religion is the apocalyptic rather than the redemptive. And it's like they almost want to be vindicated. So it's almost like they can't wait for the last day where they say they'll be going around, everybody they meet, they say, told you so, told you so, told you so. I don't want that. I want to live, Emerson. I want my child to live. I want my grandchild to live. I want hope. I don't want to hear the same old mantras trotted out. Every time I say something, every time I write something, I get the same response, as if it's never been written before. But it's been written a million times in the past week.
It's true. That's actually a great connection. I hadn't even thought about it, but it's I don't know what you call them. I mean, especially where we live, we're in an area, you talk about what to say to the innocents who have no idea what's going on around them or what's been done to them. That's the community where I'm at. I'm with you. It's kind of ironic. And I don't know, I'm jumping all over the place here, but my wife and I talk about this a lot. I'm not prone to a lot of swearing and anger, really. I'm a pretty, easygoing guy. I get around a situation where there's such a preponderance of groupthink. with the inability or unwillingness to even consider other options. And
Yeah.
it brings out that, like you described, that place of anger. I wish I could feel more compassion, but it's actually frustrating because it just feels like you said, this desire to be right, this desire to benefit from the circumstance and the result, instead of just looking toward, getting out of all that and rising up and seeing.
There's so many things here, Emerson, that need to be kind of, I suppose, spelled out. But definitely there's that sense that, I mean, the mood of all this has been shifting all the time for 5 years. There are various phases if you went back. And, there was a time, I think, for example, that, there was a legitimate anger against what they call the normies, for their, absolutely inability to or unwillingness to open their minds to any possibility that something seriously bad was happening. And, I can understand that. And I felt that myself, when you're attacked in the street. I was attacked for 2 years in the street. So I was right there, because of what I'd done and standing up against it. But time moves on, Emerson. And now I don't feel like that. I feel a great sympathy for a lot of people who were trapped by the cunning and the confidence trickery that was applied to our cultures in that time. There's no point in being angry with those people because they just fell into the trap. And our job is to get them out of it. Our job is to try to reach them and explain to them how this happened. And that's what I'm trying to do, all the time. I may be doing it to some extent in an echo chamber, because we just don't seem to be able to break out. And that's, again, a related problem, But the other thing is we have to become attractive to those people. And that means we have to be, I don't mean positive in a Pollyanna sense, I mean positive in the sense that, I wrote a thing the other night, and I used again a quote from Václav Havel, again, like in Czechoslovakia in 1989, that moment, which I'll, never forget, when he walked onto the balcony. And, 750,000 people in Wenceslas Square just erupted because the government had gone, the government had run. And here you had the Velvet Revolution beginning. This is my dream for Ireland. This is my dream for all our countries. But we need to start thinking, because everybody tells me, well, voting doesn't work. Well, I say, okay, well, what else then? The gun for the Thatch, are we getting the muskets for the Thatch or not? If we are, then tell me, and let's think about it. I'm not a great shot. But, but the Velvet Revolution is a thing that I think, in my imagination, it is the moment that we're moving towards, I think, imaginatively. That's the only way forward, in my view. In all our countries, that we basically say to those in power, enough, go. In the name of God, go. So Havel talked about hope, and he made this point very clearly, that hope is not about facts or circumstances. Hope is a quantity that resides within the heart of the human person. And the problem is that you don't need to do much to keep that flame alive, but neither do you need much to put it out. And a lot of what's happening is more in danger. A lot of the rhetoric coming from the resistance now within is more in danger of putting that flame out than it is of making it grow a little bit, which is all it needs to do to sustain through this until their eyes can be opened. And that's what I feel most strongly. In this moment when Donald Trump is poised to become, for the second time, the president of the United States, and he's surrounded by, some good people, for sure some good people. Some better people than we've seen in public life in the world for a very long time. Different mentality, different attitude, different language, different faces, the way they look. When Tulsi Gabbard speaks, I know this is a good woman.
Yes.
You see, when I think Robert Kennedy, when I hear him speak, I know he means what he says, right? Jay Bhattacharya, he was there I watched him in those April, May nights or June nights of 2020. I listened to him. He was there from the very beginning, talking about these things, explaining. And he's now in a position to actually make this real in the world, to bring the truth onto the table, which it wasn't being allowed to. And we heard this only last week from the mouth of Mark Zuckerberg, that they were told by the American government not to allow people who didn't believe in this stuff to speak, to close them down. So there's a moment of opportunity. I mean, what were we waiting for if not for this? This is my question. This gift horse, they're looking this gift horse in the mouth.
Well,
I don't know what, if this fails, obviously it's a disaster. This is, in my view, Emerson, there's nothing after this.
agreed. Yeah. No, you know what, John? You said a few things, and I was thinking, because I don't want to paint the picture that I'm some guy that's around here just judging everybody. I've gotten past that, and I do realize when you talk about being, attracting or have something, what is it? Attraction rather than promotion, right?
Yeah.
I know there are people here who are still under the cloud and the weight of the church influence, which is really heavy here, and a lot of people are drawn to me because I have a freedom in my countenance. I've been able to let go. It's the same thing with work. We don't follow that narrative. I mean, I mentioned this time it's different. My business partner and I put out a video. We let clients know, look, this time we are managing money with the idea that we're heading into a whole different phase. The next 30 years aren't going to be the last 40. And I think that freedom is the draw. The freedom of thought, the freedom of mind, the peace of mind that comes from just everything you said, trusting your heart, trusting your own discernment, rather than waiting to be told or following somebody else's, blueprint as to how you're supposed to see these things.
Yeah.
And this is leading to a question, to Trump, you're right, because the thing is you look at the fruits, and you're right. He's surrounded. I mean, when you think about it, and I think you wrote this, in fact you did, when you start looking at the type of people this man is surrounded by now, one of the, most richest men with, this whole, Musk. I mean, that guy's just unique in so many ways, aside from the fact he's wealthy, but all this, this whole innovation. RFK Jr., I mean, from a family with a legacy name in politics, and from his father was just one of my heroes, But there's always, and you even wrote about this, I think we talked about it a little bit last time. There's, and you think about all this, and yet there's still, I'll speak for me, because I'm with you. I think this is it. But there's still this just little bit of something in the back of my head that's just a little reluctant to go all in. You know what I mean? To just...
I've had those questions for a long time, Emerson, about, say, Musk. Now, I've gone through this a lot, but I go to it again. Like when I first came across Musk, I found him immensely attractive, immensely, articulate, likable, funny, sharp and brave, right? And I know about him. I know about what he, and there is this problem, in a certain sense, on paper at least. There's no evidence that he's got any malevolent intentions at all. But the fact that he's involved in the brain chipping business, in the surveillance business, the satellites, and in the electric cars, and the more importantly, self-driving cars, which we are led to believe, and it's very probable, that these will be an instrument of our total control, that we won't be able to go anywhere except if the car permits us to go, as opposed to us deciding we're going to drive our cars, and so on and so on. Now, so in a certain sense, you say, well, that's a lot of black stuff that those bad guys could make use of, but against that, I mean, Elon Musk was one of the earliest people to speak out about the dangers of AI, very, very vociferously. Nobody really took any notice of him, and he said so, and he went on with his work then. So, he is. I wrote about him back in First Things, back in about 2 years ago, and I talked about him then. I described him as a hero on a zebra. The idea of the zebra being, that the zebra is an ambiguous mount, right, a steed, right, because it could be a black horse with white stripes, or it could be a white horse with black stripes, and I don't know. So a hero on a zebra means he's ambiguous, but he's still a hero to a lot of people because he looks like a hero, he talks like a hero, and he makes you feel that he's a hero in a certain sense, right? So this is kind of what I was trying to get across, and it's about ambiguity. It's not me saying he's a hero, it's the ambiguity I'm drawing attention to, right? People didn't get this, but I now kind of are saying I think it's a white horse. I think the horse is white. I did that in my diary last week. I had a picture of him with him on a white horse. Now, again, we're back into ambiguity in a certain sense because there is that line in Revelation, behold the pale horse. But I don't want to really go beyond just laying these things down, because I would want to continue to hope until I know that my hopes have been dashed. And I don't see that there's anything criminal about that. I don't think that's a wrong thing, because that's the way we human beings have survived on this planet for as long as we have. Because I just listen to a lot of this rhetoric, which is wants to call the fire brigade and put out all these hopes, and this is from our side. And I say, well, what then? What then? What's your plan? They don't have any plan. They say we're not waiting for a savior. Well, yes and no. We are waiting for a savior because that's what politics is. Bobby Kennedy's father was a savior. His uncle was a savior. It was felt. Everybody felt it in their hearts at the time. This is why these were such great tragedies. Can we not embrace this? Like this man Trump, he has really, you've got to give it to him. I don't know how anybody in the world can still be saying the things that we're saying about Trump in 2015. This guy has proved that he's up to the job. He wants it more than anybody ever wanted it. Any job, I think, in the whole history of the world. He's there after 10 years. He's still there at 78 years of age, fighting for what he believes in. And I don't believe he's a fraud, and I don't believe he's in anybody's pocket. And we saw in the last few days in the recent time that what everybody was saying, he's in Netanyahu's pocket. Well, he's not now. We see that very clearly. I don't know. It really frustrates me, because I don't know what then if this doesn't, there isn't a plan. And the one thing we see is that apart from Trump and the deplorables, which is at the core of all our hopes in the world, because that's where it's happening. Like in Ireland, there's nothing happening. Nothing. Less than nothing. Minus. The only chance we have, and already there are some signs that this might happen, where you see the creepiest politicians on the face of planet Earth beginning to get their handkerchiefs under their knees to get down before Donald Trump, right? And that's a good sign. A little bit of humility from them would be really nice to watch.
And that was going to be my question to you. And I agree, and I love what you said about. I'm trying to, I'll go back and listen, but about hope. And at the end of the day, you're right. You got to just, at some point, you can't just sit on the sidelines. That's great counsel. I mean, you got to just jump in and go with it. And I guess you just get used, or this 5 years of you've talked about, it's just been, at least for me, people and institutions and all these, and it pervades, we've been over this, every aspect of life, where you just realize everybody is somebody, they're in somebody's pocket or somebody's, whatever, they're all puppets. Then there's a natural reluctance. It's like, I've gone from, not thinking about this stuff at all to now it's like, okay, I don't trust anybody. I'll rely on my own discernment and, between me and God, and we'll figure it out. But you're right. At some point, there's always, faith does require that blind leap, and I don't know how blind it is, because again, as you said, the facts, and Trump is the same guy he's been, and that's the reason why I've supported him, is because he's not owned by anybody, and that's clear. But my question, I guess, to you is this, because and I think you started to answer it, but I think it'd be good for people, because I'm not sure you necessarily, everybody on this side of the ocean understands the, I won't call it the Trump phenomenon because it sounds so, whatever. But how does that influence the life of somebody in Ireland, or the hope of, yourself, people in Ireland, or even in Europe? I mean, or globally. I mean, that's the thing, when Trump got elected again, the mainstream media won't show it, but I saw the clips all over social media, people everywhere, Indian Parliament, they're cheering him on. I mean, this is all over the world. You got these people that are just, why is that? How does that impact you, if you can define that? I mean, you kind of have, but I'm curious.
It's a very complex phenomenon, because, at first sight, it wasn't visible. What was it? It took me a little while in the beginning to actually, I thought that was the craziest thing I'd ever heard, that Donald Trump, I thought that was just a joke. He's running for president. Once you start to see the people who support him and you begin to understand why, and really, it's something that I've written a lot about. There's an American philosopher called Matthew B. Crawford, who's an amazing guy. Like, he's written several books about around the same idea, which is the idea that there's something about working with your hands that is essential to the human engagement with reality at the total level, at the highest level. In other words, that your understanding of the world necessitates that you use your senses to engage with the world. That, books and all that is important, but it's secondary. And, at a certain point, you will expand your knowledge by reading more and more, but you all the time need to check it against the experience you've gathered in that whole way, which you started off as a child on the rug, playing with your toys, picking up spoons and banging them on the floor and, putting them in your mouth and feeling the world. So you're exploring the world. And, and I have found this, that the reason I was attracted to him when I read his first book, which is called Shop Class as Soulcraft. He's a motorcycle mechanic, as well as a philosopher. Like, he's got all these amazing analogies that he does about the work as a mechanic and so on. About, I remember my father was like that, that he was so smart, but he had no education as such. Like, he left school at 12, but he was really smart because he was into engines, and he could do carpentry, and he could do all kinds of stuff. He could fix stuff, which in a way that I can't really. I can do kind of mullicky kind of temporary jobs, here and there, but nothing like he could, Like, he was stylish about things and really talented. And his intelligence he brought that intelligence out of those areas into, like, politics and everything else that he did, that he talked about in his own everyday life. And, people noticed this about him, that he just was so smart. Now, this seems to me to be what these people are, the deplorables. These are the people who they make and they mend America every day. They feed America every day. They clean America every day. And against them, you have a different class, which is kind of, I would say, in the nicest possible way, are a kind of a parasitic class in that sense, because they're really just living off that work, that muscle-bound work. And bizarrely, you see, this is the thing then, that when finally the penny drops, that Trump, obviously he's not like those people superficially, who make him in the world, but he's a builder, right? And he's dealt with those people all his life, and he loves those people, and they love him because they know that he understands and he speaks the language that they speak. And that's the thing about Trump that offended so many nice people, that he spoke in such a crude way. But that's simply the deplorables and the way they speak ironically or jokingly among themselves, and that's the value that you apply to it. Now, that's a universal thing, Emerson. That's the world, right across the world, those people exist. And those people are being marginalized in all kinds of ways. They're being in danger of a terminal marginalization by AI. We come back to the Elon Musk thing. Like, this is where you come to the real crux of the issue. Like because if this will put them out of business forever. Now, people then, the next sentence that comes across from the other side is, oh, well, you can't stop progress. You have to go with the times. This is about technology. And I say, well, hang on a minute. Yeah, I understand the argument that if something is capable of being invented, then we shouldn't uninvent it. But we should at the same time think about the implications it has for the nature of the world. Because we have to come back to fundamentals and ask ourselves, what is the world for? And what is the endeavor of the world for? In other words, what are all the systems we create for? What are all the philosophies we create for? Surely they are there to serve humanity first and foremost and last. They're not there for some other purpose. And one of the things that's happened to our world is that, they have become directed at entirely different purpose. They have become about profit or power. And this is a fetish of human existence. These are fetishes. they're not about the mainstream of human existence. The only point of any endeavor, whether it's political, philosophical, scientific, medical, or otherwise, has to be to make life better for humanity. And that means for humanity as a whole, and each individual human, treating them in the Christian way, as being made in the image of God. And nothing else has any place in our public discussions at any level at all. And this is what I think this is where we are now. We're right at the absolute crux of this moment, because we have Trump representing those people who get their hands dirty. And who was it that came up with that brilliant line? The people who have, their showers in the evening, not in the morning. In Ireland we would do the different analogy, which is like the people who have their dinners in the middle of the day. Farmers and all those people who come in from the fields and they have their dinner at like 2 or 3 o'clock. They don't have it at 7 or 8. This is the chasm that's opened up in the human race, because there are these people who are used to being parasites and they like the future, which it is, because the future that they're creating is essentially parasitic. It's parasitic upon skills that were learned by human beings through history, which have been stolen by technology. Henry Ford did this with Frederick Winslow Taylor back over 100 years ago, where he basically plundered the crafts of the upholsterers and the cabinet makers who made the cars, and he created the production line, and he basically created a singular model. You can have any color you like so long as it's black, And it seems like in Ireland, in the world now, for the last 4 years, you could have any politics you like. Not the last decade. You can have any politics, any beliefs you like, so long as they're woke. Otherwise, you're done. And so like now we're at this crux point where you have these two figures working side by side, Trump and Elon Musk. And there are risks in this. There are risks in everything. Like I was saying to somebody, everything is risk in life. When you're a teenager and you fall in love with somebody, it's a risk. It doesn't mean you say, I better go home to bed and stay away from this woman, this man, this boy, this girl. I'm going to embrace this possibility because it could be the greatest thing ever. It could wipe my happiness out for 3 years as well. Right? But I'm going to do it because I'm human and I want to live. I don't want to die yet.
I mentioned Charles Hugh Smith before. If it gives you any comfort, this gentleman wrote a book called Anti-Progress, and it's exactly what you said. Technology has become almost like a religion. It's like it'll solve all our problems, but there's this bigger issue, which is, it's not the humanity, the good of humanity. And you put on I know we're getting, it's dinner time for you soon here on that subject. But you linked a video, which I thought was really good. And again, it's great that there's this resources about Argentina. I'm shifting. So by the way, anybody listening to this is the economics portion of the discussion, but it's going to be brief. But but it was interesting because, you talked about this, Milei and how, the guys go 25% inflation per month. I mean, most of us can't even imagine what that's like. But they're talking about how he's gone in over in a year. And in fact, I sent this to a client of mine. He wasn't aware of any of this. So it was great, because you don't get this kind of information, the stuff that's working by, with these changes, going against the grain, you don't hear about it. But the general message there was about how he just laid it out and said, this is where we're at. And to have the courage to be honest, and I think it's like, pop the balloon with the elephant in the room. And, I bring it up because I guess, and maybe we've discussed this, but I think sometimes, like in the U.S., I mean, I think it's the same where you are. There's all these the debt keeps going up, $1 trillion every 3 months. We've got the Social Security issue, which, I mean, that's been going on as long as I've been in this business. The can gets kicked, we'll push it back, push the age back. The thing's going to run out of money in the next 10 years. And then you think about like you said, these men who are currently, I'm looking at Kennedy, Musk, and Trump. They're all got money, they're all wealthy, and so to have those kind of people risking, like you mentioned Trump. I mean, this guy's had his family at risk. He owns property. I mean, these are people who don't need to take the stand. They don't need to do it, yet they're doing it, and that is inspiring. And I think that's where the change comes from. It's,
this is exactly the point, that these guys, we have to somehow invest our hopes in something. And people say, well, they say about Mile. Mile is somebody who came out of nowhere as far as the outside world was concerned. Like, Argentina was a basket case. And his early days, he's just had a year in office, but he's made a tremendous difference. Like, he's brought inflation down under 3%, which is extraordinary. And he's a libertarian, and he's cut back government. He's got this chainsaw that he takes out, and he's just taking it to government, and that sort of thing. And Musk and JD Vance have been meeting with this guy, really, and sorry, Vivek Ramaswamy, I beg your pardon, it was actually, and Musk have been meeting with this guy. They know him well, and they intend to implement something very similar in America once they take over in next week, or on the 1st of January. So this is at least an attempt to bring the world back to some kind of rational engagement with human endeavor. Argentina was one of the richest countries in the world until the Perons got hold of it, and then it became a basket case over time, and now he's beginning to claw it back. The world is a basket case now. America is a basket case. Ireland is a basket case. It doesn't know it, but it is, and yeah. We need new thinking, we need new hope, we need new imagination. And it seems to me that far from actually bringing that about, the resistance, by and large, I mean, I know in America it's somewhat different, there's a huge support for Trump, but in the world generally, there's a lot of kind of, like he's too close to Netanyahu, he's this and he's that. Like, let's see what happens, because I have this firm belief that Donald Trump, at 78 years of age, has, I don't think he's buyable at this point. How would you buy Donald Trump after the life he's lived?
Right.
What would you have to offer him in order to sell his soul and his people out? What would you have to do? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's even remotely thinkable. And I think that he's such an inspiring figure that he's going to influence the people around him in ways that perhaps they haven't ever contemplated. This is what I think we should be watching. We're sitting in the theater. The curtain's about to go up on perhaps the greatest, drama in the history of the world. Where the world is snatched from the predator class who have been trying to imprison it, to render it captive, to plunder it. Terminally. That's what's been going on, Emerson, for the last 2 years. And we were at the point of where this was on the point of culmination. And this event is now happening, which offers at least the possibility that can be arrested and turned around. And I want to sit in my seat and I want to just watch. And if it goes bad, okay, we'll deal with that then. But it's certainly not going to be any worse than it's been for the last 5 years.
You talked about this new normal, and a new reality. And there is something exciting about that, letting go of just letting go of expectations, of attachments. And it's a theme that's come up with a lot of people I've talked to in the last year or so, and you just spoke to it too. It's a spiritual awakening. It's a higher view of things, because I was reading this thing about Argentina, and I was thinking, so how many people are really ready to hear the truth, because at some point, and this has come up, that there's got to be, with the gap of this, the top 1%, and I don't know if it's more extreme here than it is anywhere else in the world. I maybe just because of the wealth, but at some point, the people up here, there's got to be a sacrifice. When you start, there's got to be a change. And I guess the part of me that does believe that that's possible thinks that at some point that what we've been blinded to and disconnected from for so long now, which is love of humanity, because you know how it is when you connect with somebody and there's a kindness, there's a power in it. and all that other stuff dissipates, yet it's gotten so hard to stay in that I'm speaking maybe for me, but it just feels that way because everybody feels vulnerable. Everybody's, you get so you don't know where to trust. Well, is this person vax? Is this, all these divisions. And the thought of all that just melting away, it's kind of back to, you talked about the resistance, and there's an element of people that are still locked in this I want justice mode. I want to see these people hang, but it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
And I was like that too. I was like, gosh, these people need to pay, but you realize, no, that's not, there's a bigger issue here that's greater than all that. That's so punitive and so small. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm glad we've had this conversation because you've kind of brought me back to that place of, gosh, let's see where this goes. And it certainly can't, it can only get better.
I think it can only get better. And I think that, you see, to go to the other side of the line again and say, like we have been talking about the I call them the combine, you can call the predator class, the Illuminati, whatever they call themselves. We don't even know who they are really. And everybody has a theory about it, and they become obsessed with their theory being the absolute only definition. And then other people say, no, there's no such thing. It's much more chaotic than that. And now, but nevertheless, we have seen this convergence of power and money at the top of the pyramid. And we have seen that they want more, and they want everything. That's clear. And that we have seen that our systems and our political servants have become their slaves for the last 5 years against their own people, where they're attacking, and this is universal, right across the Western world in particular. The governments have been attacking their own peoples, replacing them with imported, aliens who have no affinity with their cultures or countries, and we see all that happening. And now we look at this opportunity, and we listen to Trump, and he seems to be on the right page in pretty much everything, right? So what's not to like? Well, it just seems to be there's a kind of almost a recreational kind of negativity at play here, which doesn't really want this to be over or something. But I would say this, that if the combined predator class of Illuminati look at the movement and listen to the rhetoric that is mostly happening now, certainly in Ireland, and listen to it very carefully, they're going to be very pleased. Because this is exactly what they've been trying to do to the world for the last few years. To create a demoralization, a hopelessness, and a sense of, nothing much is possible. Well, I believe that things are possible. I believe that out of this, the Deus ex machina comes out of the blue, the God out of the machine, the event that is unpredictable, that we could not have planned. This is what we learned. This is what we were taught. This is what you and I, Emerson, have experienced, that your greatest plans are going to be dwarfed by the possibilities that will emerge if you just simply hope and do the right thing in every step, in every moment, in every thought for the foreseeable future. You don't have to do great things. Just do little things well. Do them properly. Do them with the right spirit. Do them with faith. Do them with hope. And let's leave the rest then to the powers of the universe, the powers of God, whatever you want to call it. And because it's not any more about Donald Trump than it is about you or me, Emerson. He's a servant of this process. He's an important one. But, what's happened is a future that is going to be either very, very black or something much better than we've ever had before. I really am on the side of things being much better than they've been, not on the side of continuing this just to be proven right about something.
No, agreed. I don't know if there's anything I can add to that, John. That's beautiful. I just, for anybody, again, I said at the beginning, and it'll pop up on the YouTube here, but johnwaters.substack.com. Your thoughts, I think, I'm not trying to put you on a platform because I know you're a humble guy, but you're part of all this process, and I know you influence people with your thoughts, and I'm just grateful personally I found you because you put words to things. Even you talked about nostalgia, and I kind of got to a point we've talked before where I was questioning my whole, all these things. Well, is this even real? My life, and you just start to wonder if it's all part of this matrix that has no meaning. It's just like those feelings and experiences are valid.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important thing, that because it very much relates and plugs into all this. This idea that because okay, we were drifting around the world maybe up to a few years ago without really putting everything together. We were seeing things and we were reacting in a certain way, but we didn't see the connections until relatively recently. And everybody had different wake up points. Fine, but uh, the point is that you just can't assume that because that's the case that it offers us a better template for living, by becoming more and more like that, by becoming paranoid and disbelieving and completely kind of cynical about everything. That isn't the way forward either. So okay, we need to wake up a little bit. Fine, we have done a little bit. Okay, well, can we now just have a little bit of naivety just once in a while, just be a little bit naive, and let's trust that some force out there called maybe God has good intentions towards us, and wants to make the world better, and maybe this is his instrument. How do we know that it is? How would we know that this were not the case? Because this tends to happen in human reality, as we know in our own lives. Things come out of that deus ex machina. It comes in all kinds of weird ways that you don't expect. You think you've got the best plan, and that plan becomes overturned. And then at the moment of the darkest kind of, hopelessness, a light appears that you never imagined existed, and something changes, and suddenly you're in a whole new dispensation. This is possible. I've seen it in my own life. I've come through a lot of stuff in my own life, of a personal nature, where I thought, great doom was imminent, for not just me, for others, and here we are. We're here to watch this moment, sitting in our seats in the theater. We don't have to do anything except, wish those on the stage well in their endeavors to save the world from the great evil that confronts it.
One last thought, because I was thinking, and again, I hope you don't mind me bringing up the AA and recovery stuff, but
No.
it's so fundamental, and the fact we have it in common. But I was thinking, just what you remind me of, I wanted to bring up is when I first got sober, this idea of surrendering to God and just this blank canvas of higher power was so appealing to me. That it was the level of faith I had. It was the biblical childlike faith. I turned everything over, conversations, all of it. It was just refreshing. And then as time has gone on, and we both have a pretty good amount of time under our belts. And I'll speak for me. Maybe it's the same for you, but well, okay, you start realizing I have some talents in this world and I can navigate things, and you start grabbing a little bit control, right? And what I've been finding is this process, like you said, waiting for the jury to come back, has brought me back to, I'm getting back to that childlike, that faith. It's almost like that's the where this is all headed. It's gone full circle in my life for me to where I'm back to just what you're saying. Let it all go. Yeah, there is this God. It seems like he's been hiding, in the world, but he's still there. I'm saying he, that's for me, whatever. But this source, this power is still there. It hasn't gone anywhere, and is capable of, like you said before, the impossible, these great things. And you said it in your writing. You said that no evil can prevail in the face of good men taking action, and then ultimately that's the implication is being inspired by a greater call from an all-loving and benevolent God.
That's right.
So
that's right, Everson. I think that that's Edmund Burke, that line about for evil to triumph, all it takes is for good men to do nothing, and that's been my touchstone through all this. That we have to do something. We have to but we do things in a spirit of humility, in the sense that we can't change the world. We can only join with the force, the greatest force in the universe, which is well-intentioned towards us. We have to believe that. And if we do that, then we trust in the outcome. And life tells us that works.
Amen. Listen, it's good to see you. Let's connect again a few months into this new presidency and see where things look this summer. But I just appreciate you, John. It's always good to talk to you, and you're a grounding influence. So thank you for joining me today on UPThinking Finance.
Thank you, Emerson, very much. Thank you.
Emerson Fersch is a registered representative with and securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Advisor services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and separate entity from Capital Investment Advisors. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and the companies they represent are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Capital Investment Advisors. Individual tax and legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal expert. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of principal.